this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Let's talk about RingRx, our latest sponsor. RingRx is a high-quality, HIPAA-compliant telephone, text, and fax communications platform. They provide seamless, cost-effective communications for behavioral therapists, medical practices, hospitals, and other healthcare providers. RingRx is designed for modern healthcare environments. They offer customizable features like a phone app, automated patient outreach, voicemail, after-hours call routing, and top-quality desk phones. Try RingRx for free today at ringrx.com. And if you sign up using the code CLIMB, you'll get 15% off your monthly bill forever. Conditions apply. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. I am thrilled to share this guest with you today. We are going to have a conversation about compassionate conversations and how to be an effective leader, which is always a topic very near and dear to me, with trying to do that within my own practice and educating others on how to do the same. So, Gill Brabner, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to meet you, Julia, and delighted to be here. So Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. So let's get started. Share with the audience some of your career climb and how it is that these became topics of interest to you.
Right. Well, for the past 20 years, I've run my business called Resound Training and Development. We're a UK business. We're based in London, and it's focused on learning and development in workplaces, so in organisations and businesses. And I was really keen to develop an approach which was highly interactive and immersive, and that's because I'd previously been to drama school. And I wanted to bring some of that creativity into my work. Mm-hmm. So I very quickly set up a forum theatre team, a team of professional actors, and we scripted some scenarios and we played them out to our client group. We invited them to an event. This is years ago now. And we then sat down with them and they told us how to make it work in their organisations, which was absolute gold dust. And that created the framework for how we now run our forum theatre workshops. And we've been doing it ever since. And it's brilliant for any type of work conversation, anything to do with behaviour. So that's what we specialise in. So when we deliver leadership, it's very much around leadership behaviours and how values manifest themselves through behaviours, that sort of thing. And we've done a lot of work in healthcare in the UK. And some years ago, there was a series of really difficult events which triggered a whole load of work around compassion, because there was a public inquiry and the QC, the Queen's Counsel leading that, asked the question, what caused staff to lose their compassion for patients? And that question then sort of mushroomed into lots of different inquiries and discussions and expanded out well beyond health into other organisations. And I found that really fascinating and really important. And so I started doing some research around what it means to be compassionate. And then from there, we started to develop this model, really simple model of bringing compassion into everyday conversations. And it's just great for a work conversation, but it's also great to use with family and friends as well. And that's just been a sort of an important part of our work. So we then integrated it into our forum theatre work, which is where we act out different types of conversations and show people how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wonderful. Okay, so let's start with the form theater work. So how does this actually look? And these workshops, how are they structured? So what comes to mind for me is role playing and what we utilize in the therapeutic space. Is it similar to that, where they're acting out scenarios and then is there conversations around what's being witnessed? How does that actually work?
similar to that, and we do some of that role play work as well. But the forum theatre tends to be a bit bigger, a bit so that it's a scene from beginning to end, usually with 3 characters, sometimes 4 or 5, depending on whether we're delivering a workshop or sometimes we deliver a piece on stage at a conference, and that usually requires sort of more people and it's a larger piece of work. But our forum theatre workshops typically are 3 actors and me facilitating.
Mm-hmm.
So a workshop starts with some, the welcome and introductions, things like that. But I also make it really clear to the delegates that they will not be asked to role play. And that's because we know that anxiety really gets in the way of learning. And typically our workshops will have 25, 30 delegates attending each one. And in some organisations, there's a lot of competitiveness between peers, and sometimes that's managed well and sometimes it isn't. But we're not always aware of those cultures that are going on in the organisations.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we are, if we've been asked to go in and deliver a piece on bullying and harassment, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But it might be that we're asked to show conversations around performance management for newly promoted managers or something. So we introduce the scenario, I introduce the way of working, and then we play out the scene from start to finish. And they're short, 5 to 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the audience have the opportunity to interview the characters. So if they ask open, insightful questions, they'll get more information from the character about what's
Mm-hmm.
going on. But if they perhaps don't do that, or they take a different approach, then the actor staying in character can simply avoid answering the question. So there's some useful learning in the types of questions we ask and how we approach things. And then we sort of summarize the information, and they start to really get involved in terms of what's going on and what else might be happening. And because we've got 3 characters, they'll have 3 different perspectives on the same situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really powerful because
Yeah.
so often we go in with our blinkers on and just our point of view, and and there's always another perspective, isn't there? So
Right.
that's a really dynamic way of revealing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the bit they love. They get to redirect it. So this is where the actors improvise. So the first version of the scene, they've learnt the script.
Sure.
But this time they are totally reliant on what the audience tell them to do. So I say to the audience, we're going to play the scene again, and I want you to stop. You just shout out stop as soon as you see something which needs to change. And it could be something really small. It could be that facial expression, that expression that crosses someone's face, which alerts you to what they're
Mm-hmm.
really thinking. Or it could be that tone of voice on a phrase, which gives you some sort of subtext that you're worried about, of their body language.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, what they're saying. And I mean, it's so much when you start to unpack it. And I say to them, and if you don't stop it, it's going to play out exactly the same as it did last time. So please stop it and improve it, because we create the solution to the problem together. And they love that. And then the actors are really skilled at improvisation, so they can, pick it up, and they will do exactly as they've been told. And
Mm-hmm.
we have some fun with that, as you can imagine. So, and then the audience can try out different approaches,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody will say, "Well, actually, I don't agree with that. I'd like to see you do this," and then they give their direction, and then so you get quite a diverse sort of a range of approaches to tackling something.
Sure.
Um, and so they're learning from each other, the group are learning from each other. And I think the key thing for me, having worked in learning and development all these years, is that these workshops are memorable. So the learning is so much easier to transfer and apply into the role because it stays with you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some approaches, you do it and it's gone, or you've just been given so much information that you can't retain it all for very long. But
Sure.
because you've been there and you're emotionally involved in the story and what the characters are telling you, and when there's a victim of bullying, or that the manager's just been so harsh, or and you're rooting for that character despite yourself. So some people come into the room quite resistant to the approach, but they're very quickly won over. So then we end up with a much better approach, and
Mm-hmm.
there's always room for more improvement or for something else. But they usually agree that, yeah, they've I ask them usually to bring empathy, to bring compassion into the conversation, and say, have you
Mm-hmm.
managed that? Is that character now speaking to this person in the way that you would want them to? Um, and then we facilitate discussion groups, and we get even more from that.
Mm-hmm.
So typically we run half-day workshops, and we will have 2 different scenarios that we play out in each half-day workshop.
What a
It's quite
fascinating
fun.
approach. So I definitely see the benefits
Yeah.
of the perspective taking. And I also see benefit to someone seeing something play out. It has that ability to depersonalize something, where so many of us live our lives through movies and through books and through characters. And I find that it's so much easier when it's something external. But do you find that there is very easily that correlation and that applicability to someone's personal situation? And what are some other major takeaways that you've seen from the participants after one of these workshops?
So in terms of personalisation, we take a lot of care to tailor the scenarios, if we're using something from our sort of library, to tailor them to the workplace that we're going into.
Okay.
So if there's particular paperwork or systems, or we'll use theirs. We embed their values into the scene so that they can be discussed as well. So there's a lot of personalisation, so people can recognise it.
Mm-hmm.
But what we mustn't do is play out one person's actual story,
Uh,
because that, I think, can be, that's really unfair, and we don't know whether that one person's story is reflective across an organisation.
sure.
So if we're going in and working with the organisation, say to develop a bespoke piece, then we always make sure we've got a group of 6 people supporting that, so that we've got some, again, more information from different sources, from different parts of the
Mm.
organisation, to bring into a scenario.
Okay.
In terms of impact on delegates, sometimes the impact is immediate and quite dramatic. So many years ago, we were running a session on bullying and harassment, and suddenly there was a young woman in the group who suddenly went, "That's me! Oh my God, that's me!" And she had recognised something in the bullying character in herself. She left the room, and you know, we carried on. I went out to make sure she was okay and
Mm-hmm.
to find out what was going on. She phoned a colleague and apologised for some behaviour
Mm-hmm.
previously. I mean, how powerful was that?
Right.
It was very dramatic. It doesn't normally happen as dramatically as that, but that's one example which we will never forget. Um, we worked for a big institution in central London. It's quite iconic. I can't name it, but you'd recognise it if you saw it on the television. Um, and with the group there, we had a director very, very resistant to the approach and to us, um, and then by the end of the workshop, he was so caught up in it all. He asked us to go and work with his division on their own, do a special piece of work, which they
Oh,
budgeted, or
wow.
found the budget for, and off we went and did that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yes, it's sort of it can be immediate, but then we delivered a piece recently, and somebody said, "Oh, I remember you coming in here years ago and doing one of these, and we loved it, and we're so pleased you've come back to do this." I had a client contact me and say, "Oh, you did some work with us. I think it was 2014, and we'd like you to come back." And
Wow.
everyone loved it. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
loved it. So it's as I say, they're memorable because people are so fully immersed in the story and they're emotionally engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then in a large healthcare provider here, um, we did numerous sessions and they tracked the change over time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really helpful. So, and that was about customer care. That was about interactions with patients. So their frontline staff,
Sure.
receptionists, administrators. So it'd be like people working in your practice, Julia,
Mm-hmm.
that talk to the people that come through, um, and then they tracked the difference over time.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found was that there was an immediate improvement in the interactions with patients, and that lasted for about 6 weeks. And then what was really important was that the teams in their team meetings,
Mm-hmm.
they reflected on the session that we'd run and continuously brought learning from it back to the forefront of people's minds, so that they maintained then that improvement. So
Mm-hmm.
if they didn't do that, it dropped off because it was just, they sustained it for 6 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
but they hadn't actually made the sort of a complete change. But as long as they brought it into discussions, it was maintained.
I
So
see.
that was really interesting.
Okay. So not only
So it's
impactful,
like, I
but
suppose,
memorable.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And I think that's because, we all have those challenging days where we can slip into an old way of being. Maybe, excuse me, an interaction's triggered something in us, or we're feeling tired, or there's a lot of stress in our personal lives. We're
Mm-hmm.
simply not at our best. Um, but having that reminders, having your colleagues talk about it, I think really helps
Mm-hmm.
embed the learning.
Absolutely. So, are there suggestions that you make? It sounds like there can be that opportunity to take a lot of what they learned, and the hope is that they continue that in future meetings and interactions and continue to discuss it. But anything that they can be doing, like you said, to continue to integrate what they're learning from that point forward.
So we have videos of all our major scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
So often clients will then do a follow up using the video resource as a reminder,
Sure.
and that can be really useful. So yes, it's having continuous conversations, isn't
Mm-hmm.
it, for good practice?
Sure.
And
So,
certainly, I think with something like customer care, then that's really important. If we're talking about bullying and harassment, we need to see an immediate change. Some people's behaviour, if they are being inappropriate, there needs to be an immediate change.
Yeah. Okay. So let's
And
transition into
yeah.
the ECA model. So tell us about empathy, care, action, and how you utilize that in your work.
Okay, so I was fascinated when I did some research on compassion to find that it's not enough to have empathy and care. Um, to really be compassionate, you have to take action,
Mm-hmm.
either on behalf of someone or empower them to take action. And so it makes it an ideal model, I think, for work conversations
Mm-hmm.
and supporting change, and for well-being, because it really supports people to think about what they can do in their well-being. So we know that when somebody is allowed to talk about their perspective on something, that opportunity really makes them feel more valued.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something very empowering about somebody listening to what you think and having that opportunity to speak. So I think there's that empathy piece when we ask someone to tell us what their point of view is and we listen without judgment to it. I think that has huge value for people.
Mm.
And we know that managers in organisations are very busy, and I'm sure that most people really intend to um, notice whether somebody is struggling or not.
Mm-hmm.
But when a manager has a very heavy workload, or when they're going through a restructure or organisational change, or perhaps the team now work remotely or they have some hybrid arrangement, then they may not notice. That's just a fact of life. But if they start with asking for that other person's perspective and point of view on something, then that empathy piece is going to be met. So within that, you would want the manager to, or colleague, whoever it is, to you take that opportunity to build rapport and trust, demonstrate that they're listening with the intention to understand, so that they can get a sense of what it really is like to be that other person and
Mm-hmm.
their experience. So we get that sort of proper empathy
Sure.
um, achieved. And then in terms of care, I think it's really important for people to know that we care about them, we care about their well-being, and at work we care about the whole team, and we also care about what the purpose of the team is and the outcomes that they need to achieve. So it's caring for all the people within that system
Mm-hmm.
and what we're doing to contribute towards the success of the business or the organisation.
Sure.
And there's a great question to ask in that, which is, what matters to you? And we did a piece of research during COVID where we went out to clients, to HR directors and people in learning and development, and we said to them, what matters to you? And they said things like, well, that all our staff are okay, and the well-being, and etc., etc. And then we followed up with, and what really matters to you
Yeah.
right now? And then there was this sort of big pause, and it was, well, I'm concerned about my health, and it was about themselves and their family.
Sure.
So they're just great questions to
Mm-hmm.
ask if you feel that you need to get underneath something.
Sure.
What matters in this situation? Yes, we've got conflict going on in the team. What matters, and what really matters to you right now? And I think the answers that come back will will really help you then steer in the right direction.
For
So we
sure.
care about well-being, yeah, and we care about um, what other people care about, what matters to them, and we care about achievement and outcomes because we're in business to do that. And then the last piece of the model is the action, which, as I mentioned at the start, is about empowering others to take action that's right for them.
Hmm.
Um, but if they're not able, for whatever reason, and it's within your gift to take action on their behalf, then yes, that can be the right thing to do. But it's the
Hmm.
right time, it's the right action at the right time that we're looking for there. And I think there's also that opportunity to give recognition and to celebrate how far people have come,
Right.
changes they've achieved. Um, yeah, sometimes we don't pause to do that. Sometimes we're simply on to the next thing.
Right.
And I think a compassionate approach you just need to breathe and you need to
Hmm.
pause and think, right, where are we? Actually, look how far we've come. We might not be at the end point. We might not be quite where we want to be, but my goodness,
Hmm.
we've done all of this, and yeah, now we're ready for the next piece. So try to encourage people to use the model. We certainly use it in our programs, and we have taken feedback from people in all sorts of different walks of life in terms of how they might use the model. So um, we've obviously we work in health and we've used it extensively there, but we've also had a landlord use it with his tenants. So this is someone with rental properties, and
Sure.
so that was really interesting. Um, so that it can be used in
It's
any work
versatile.
situation, any any family situation.
Hmm.
Um, take that deep breath, go in, ask for their point of view. Start with that. Start with the empathy. I think it shifts
Yeah.
the dial so quickly. And at the moment, we're in such a divisive world, aren't we?
Hmm.
We've just had our general election. Um, and it just seems like the world is full of aggression and conflict at the moment. Certainly on the news every day, there's more and more reports of different conflict and different problems. And I just really want people to think, yeah, but I can make my bit of the world better. I
Hmm.
can reach out and have a more compassionate conversation
Hmm.
today.
Absolutely. So, for those listening, the majority are entrepreneurs, business owners. They may be managing a team. So, for those who are leaders, there were two key takeaways that I picked up on so far, and I'd love to hear some other tangible tips that you have for leaders to be more effective in their role. But you were talking about really honing in on what truly matters to your team members, and then also making sure to acknowledge the action that they have taken, the progress that they have made, and achievements. What else would you say contributes to somebody being effective in a leadership role?
I think remembering to listen, because the more senior you are, the less information reaches you, and it can be, um, you know, information that is skewed to what they think you want to hear. So I think leaders need to get out amongst the workforce. And for business owners, obviously they're probably much closer to their team, but that might be taking the sort of temperature test with clients, with
Sure.
customers, um, encouraging honest feedback, because you want to continuously improve your service, your levels of service, what you offer, and so on. So listening is
Hmm.
so important,
Yeah.
and it's very easy when we have so many tasks to do and so many problems to solve, just to go into that problem solving mode. But the answers are so much more effective when they're identified through the listening, aren't they?
Mm,
And through the people that are delivering that bit of the service, they have the answers.
hmm.
So
Such a
yeah,
great point. Well, this was
I
extremely
think it's
helpful. So,
crucial for.
for those that are listening that are interested in learning more, what is the best place for them to go? If you would share your website, and are you on any social media?
So LinkedIn primarily, you can find me there. The website, yeah, do have a look at that. We
Hmm.
do have some free workshops coming up in the autumn, which we will be publicising. So if you would like to join a workshop and experience being part of um, the work that we do with actors, then do come along to one of those. We'll have various time slots so that we can go across time zones. Yeah, so I'd love to see some people from your neck of the woods on there. That would be fantastic.
It definitely sounds like something
And of
worth
course, you
checking
can
out and
find out.
experiencing.
Yeah, and you mentioned our effective leader
Hmm.
quiz. So Julia, what did you think of that?
I thought it was really helpful. It goes along with what you mentioned before, the importance of taking time to pause and reflect and really think about your answers to those questions and how you're incorporating a lot of that in your daily interactions with team members. And it seems like you covered a wide range. And as I was going through and answering the
Yeah,
questions, I definitely had a sense of where I fell before actually getting the results. So definitely share a little bit more about the
great,
thought process behind that.
great. So this is a quiz run by something called Score App, and you simply click on the link, and we've got 15 questions. It takes between 2 and 3 minutes typically to
Hmm.
complete, and there's three categories that it looks at. It looks at the team culture, um, and it looks at development, how you develop your team, and it looks at your personal leadership as well. So it's just a quick snapshot so that people can really reflect on where they are on their own leadership journey, and what they might want to then go and hone in on for development.
Yes, fantastic. Well, I will make sure to include your website in the show notes, and I hope everybody listening goes on there and takes the quiz. Thank you so much for the work that you do and sharing more with us today.
Thank you, Julia. It's been great speaking with you. Thank you.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.